Participate, engage, speak out, use your voice to be an effective advocate. The Voices in Advocacy podcast examines the diverse landscape of advocacy, exploring the ins and outs of building influence, driving change, and creating champion advocates. It's now time for the Voices in Advocacy podcast with your host, Roger Rickard.
Hello and welcome to the Voices in Advocacy podcast. I'm Roger Rickard, president and founder of Voices in Advocacy, where we work with organizations to inspire, educate, engage, and activate your supporters by turning them into influential and effective advocates. And this is the podcast dedicated to the art of advocacy. This podcast is for the people that work and engage in advocacy efforts for their organizations, be they corporations, associations, trade organizations, and nonprofit cause groups. Now, let's get started. In today's episode, we have two fabulous guests. First, we meet Dave DuBois. Dave is the president and CEO of IAEE, the International Association of Exhibitions and Events. He is a former executive of PCMA and MPI. He has served on the board of the American Society of Association Executives and currently serves on the board of directors for Destination International, the Meetings Mean Business Coalition, and the U.S. Travel Association. In 2019, Dave was inducted into the Exhibitions Industry Council's Hall of Leaders, the industry's most prestigious honor. Dave, welcome to today's show.
Thank you, Roger, and I'm glad you used the long version.
We'll talk about that in a second. Our second guest is Tommy Goodwin. He is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, known as ECA, a newly formed association dedicated to the recovery and advancement of the business events industry. He has spent more than 20 years leading a wide range of government relations, public affairs, and issue advocacy efforts for several globally recognized associations and corporations, including Oracle Corporation, AARP, and the Project Management Institute. Tommy was recognized by The Hill in its 2020 list of association top lobbyists. Welcome, Tommy.
Roger, thank you very much for having us both here today.
It's my extreme pleasure. And let me tell you, listeners, you need to know only that I hit the highlights of these gentlemen's careers. Both are very impressive, and we will have their full biographies in the show notes. So let's begin by talking about the newly formed Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance, known as ECA. Dave, can you briefly explain how the ECA came to be?
Well, thank you, Roger. And as Tommy said, it's a pleasure to join you today, and hello to all your listeners and viewers. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot about advocacy from professionals like Roger and Tommy. I really didn't get dragged into it, but Roger and I go back 20 plus years where we worked on government affairs and advocacy when he was a volunteer member of Meeting Professionals International, and I was on their staff. So obviously it always has been and always will be important. But I tell you, when we hit Roger, the pandemic a year ago, March, a little over a year ago now, obviously it exacerbated and accelerated the need for advocacy at a level we've never seen before. So in the exhibitions and conferences business, we've been doing Exhibitions Day, we've been doing Meetings Industry Day. We've been advocating on the Hill with U.S. Travel Association, the American Society of Association Executives, and others. But, we really never, Roger, had a dedicated focus until the need to have a full-time dedicated focus. So you'll hear from Tommy and myself a little bit later more about ECA, but we started the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. And for the first time ever, Tommy is our Vice President of Government Affairs for this entity, which was founded by 7 organizations with 7 or 8 others that are supportive at various levels, both financially and from a call to action standpoint. And we now have on the Hill, or in Alexandria, Virginia, close to being on the Hill. Tommy that will represent us 365 days a year, not quite 24/7, because he does have a wonderful wife and son to take good care of.
Well, that's great. Dave, who are some of the other organizations that are involved?
Well, there's an alphabet soup of 7 of us. The primaries are the Society of Independent Show Organizers, which is the association and group for for-profit exhibition and conferences, companies like Reed and Informa and Clarion. A lot of folks would maybe know their names, maybe not, as well as the service contractors, the Freemans, the GESs, the folks who actually help build and produce shows, as well as 5 other organizations, and it's all going to be listed on the links you'll provide as well, Roger.
Wonderful. That's fabulous, Dave. Congratulations on putting this all together. It was very much needed for the industry, as you and I have been working directly on this for the last 8 years with efforts to keep moving this forward. Tommy, being new in the role, what is the first thing that one should do to build an effective and influential government affairs program?
Oh, Roger, that's a great question. And it's interesting, in the advocacy world, there's always a lot of talk about benchmarking and best practices and case studies. And I think those are good to a point, but I think what some folks sometimes don't realize is that every organization that gets involved in advocacy has a set of assets that are important to them, that are core to who they are, that they bring forward to talk to policymakers, whether that's here in Washington, D.C. or in their home states and cities. And being part of this group, even just for a little while, it was very clear to see there are some amazing, amazing advocates, and there are some amazing business owners, show organizers, event professionals who have these stories to tell. And so it was very easy to see early on that in this business events ecosystem, we've got some people who can really talk about what they do in their communities, the value that they bring, right? This is an industry, more than 6.6 million jobs, contributes nearly $400 billion to gross domestic product, right? These are people who can tell stories about what it means in their community and kind of have that leader to leader conversation with policymakers. So when I came in and saw that, it was very clear, right? We need to connect these folks directly to members of Congress and their staffs, directly to folks in cities and states that are going to make decisions about how we reopen society safely and in a healthy way, and let them have that dialogue. Because it's one thing when the guy in Washington, D.C. tells a story, but as you know, when the advocate tells their own story and they know that they can make that impact, it's just so much more impactful.
Well, it's personal, and it's all about their constituents that are in there. And we have been speaking in the past, people that have been involved in this effort. There isn't a congressional district in this country that does not have businesses that buy and sell their goods and services through the trade show and exhibition marketplace. And it's vitally important, if we're going to get commerce moving and keep people moving and help train people, that we reach out to those people. I couldn't agree with you more. And I agree. There is always a laundry list of the set of assets that go with that. So with that, looking at where we're at right now with the 117th Congress, and now about 60 days into work here, where are the priorities for the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance? Either one of you, Tommy, you want to jump in first?
Sure. It's like you said, right? This is an industry with its suppliers and organizers and different parts of this world who really contribute nationwide. And as everybody here knows, the pandemic really froze this business in place last March. And, the ripple effects of that, and all those closures, they're continuing today. The industry is probably going to be one of the longer ones to recover. And what we recognize at ECA is there's going to be a need to stimulate the economy with relief and recovery incentives to help restart this business. And so our number one priority this year, it's a piece of legislation. It's called the Hospitality and Commerce Job Recovery Act. And it's just the kind of stimulus bill that the industry needs to get people back to work and help bring back all of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. And it has different elements to it. It provides a temporary tax credit for, revitalizing the business events industry to help offset the cost of either attending a convention or hosting one. And that goes all the way out from 2022 to 2024. And it's got some other provisions, around employee retention tax credits and supporting the restaurant and food and beverage industry and some pieces on the leisure travel side as well. But for our community, it's particularly important because it'll help support the offset of some of the costs that these venues and organizers and suppliers are taking on to keep people safe, right? Think about, the remediation, the cleaning, the PPE, having increased, numbers of people on staff to make sure that people are being safe so that, we're preventing the spread of COVID-19 and we're bringing these shows, these important trade shows and exhibitions back in a way that people know they have the confidence to be safe. We've done some great work recently in Orlando that shows, we can have thousands of people in a convention center safely and ensure that not one single case of COVID was spread. So, from our perspective, the sooner a bill like that can be enacted, the sooner, that our country can help bring jobs back to the sector, shorten the long recovery cycle we're all in, and help provide some support and economic stability to, like you said, all 435 districts nationwide that rely on business events, trade shows, and exhibitions.
David, want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just briefly, Roger, as Tommy said, in 2019, we had the best exhibitions and conferences ecosystem and financial profitability ever. Just the exhibitions alone generated over $100 billion in direct spending, and globally over $300 billion. That's just the exhibitions piece. And you can magnify that, as you know, Roger, 20, 30 times for the overall business events industry globally. But, the CARES Act and the Relief Act in December, as Tommy said, has helped. But our industry the exhibitions industry lost 92% of its revenues in 2019. We're slowly, because I grew up, as you did, you grew up in Pennsylvania, I grew up in Michigan. And, when you're driving through snowstorms and ice storms, eventually you see sunshine. Eventually you'll actually see the road instead of following a truck and making sure that you follow the trail that truck driver is leaving for you. We're seeing the sunshine, Roger, but we still have a big climb up that hill. About a third of the state and city convention centers are now open. We're starting to see that. We are really excited about the fall. But you know what that means? Getting back to about 60% of what we did in 2019 in the fall of 2019. So we still got quite a ways to go. And as Tommy said, we will continue to lobby with his support and leadership to get additional incentives and motivation. And you know what? Bottom line, we need corporate executives, as Tommy said, to feel safe about sending their ladies and gentlemen, their staff in as exhibitors and attendees. Because until that happens,
that's right,
we can open up every show that we had in the fall of 2019, and we may only get 40 or 50% of the attendance that we really need.
So to point that out into the bill that Tommy mentioned, the Hospitality and Commerce Job Recovery Act, it's Senate 477 and House 1346. So thanks for bringing that up, and I couldn't agree more with both of your comments about, one, getting back to doing the commerce part of this, but also doing it safely. I think of the musical Hamilton. I'm not going to waste my shot, and I got to tell you, I got my second shot yesterday. I'm ready to go wherever in the world. Let's get this thing moving now. So, Tommy, what can supporters of ECA do to better protect and defend the exhibitions and conferences industry, both for the industry itself, but the individual businesses and for their employees, so we can get them back to work?
It's like David said, we have some measures that have helped in recent times. The Paycheck Protection Program was one. There are some other support measures that have assisted as well. But we do need something more that's specific and targeted, right? Because like David said, we do see light at the end of the tunnel, but it's going to be a journey. I think there's somewhat of a misunderstanding by some policymakers that it's simply as a matter of flipping a switch and saying, okay, we're going to begin to reopen society. This isn't Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they're not necessarily going to come. We have to make sure that we're putting people in an environment, both vendors and exhibitors, where not only they feel safe and healthy, and we've demonstrated as an industry we can do that, but also where they're incentivized to attend. And so we've been asking our advocates and folks in the industry to reach out to their members of Congress to talk about this bill. I will tell you, I'm still a newcomer to ECA, but I have been amazed by the energy and passion that they show in reaching out. And, oftentimes, you see some associations, they're really pushing their advocates and pushing their members to, okay, just make the call. If you just make the call, these folks are self-organized, they're moving, they've got a story to tell because they've got a very serious need, right? These are people, I can give you one example, a member company I work with a fair bit, this was somebody down in Central Florida who had 41 employees in March of last year. And now he's looking at 5 unpaid volunteers, right? These are people who need support and relief. And when there's that sort of burning platform that they're working from, what they have been able to do in terms of letting Capitol Hill know and letting folks in their states and cities know who they are and what they need has been really remarkable. So we're just trying to corral that and fan the embers of their work and make sure that everybody knows that the exhibitions and conference industry contributes a lot to cities, states, and nationwide, the bottom line. And when they know that story and they got a very direct way can help, that's a really great combination that hopefully is going to make a lot of impact this year.
Yeah, telling the
Roger,
story.
And I'll be in 30 seconds to remind everybody that our industry drives sales tax revenues for cities and states. That helps to pay for police and fire and roads and hospital systems for people who don't have insurance. I'll stop there because I can get going, but I've been blessed. I've had a 45-year, I know I don't look that old, or maybe I do look that old, 45-year career, watch it, in the industry. And I tell you what, as Tommy said, the passion has never been this high. And Roger, you've been right there with me for many of those years.
Yeah, we have been fighting the fight and trying to take the story not only to Capitol Hill, but very much so it has to go throughout the government ecosystem into all the elected officials so that they know and understand at each level the impact that it has on them. I ask this question of all of my guests. And so what is the first thing that comes to mind when you think of advocacy? Dave, you go first.
Wow, that's a good one. The first thing, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And when we interviewed Tommy and a few other ladies and gentlemen as our finalists, Tommy was high energy and convinced us of the fact that, hey, if you want me to come in and in the first 60 days, snap my fingers and make things perfect, there's nobody that can do that. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you know what? I've spent more time in the last year on advocacy because we need it. And as a leader of my association and with the support of my board, we were able to get a lot done, raise money, and have for the first time, Roger, a full-time professional licensed lobbyist in Tommy Goodwin, and we're pleased to have him with us.
Excellent answer, David. Tommy?
So when I think about this, I go back to an old Thomas Jefferson quote, and a lot of your listeners have probably heard this before, but he said a long time ago, we in America do not have a government by the majority. We have a government by the majority who participate. And that's the difference, right? If you've ever watched the news or turned on and said, why on earth is Congress talking about that? That means that they've heard from a lot of their constituents and a lot of their stakeholders that an issue matters to them. And what we're focused on is getting all of the folks in the business events ecosystem, the suppliers, the organizers, everybody in that realm to focus their energy and let Capitol Hill and their state houses and their city councils know who they are. And if we do that, I think we're going to have a tremendous impact both in 2021 and going forward.
So explain, Tommy, why it is important if you're an elected official, if you're a member of Congress, why do you really want to hear from the people?
Well, I think you want to hear from your constituents because we find ourselves in this remarkable environment where there's so much information, there's so much noise. And over at least the last 20 years that I've been involved in this business, politics has become much more nationalized, right? We hear about the national issues and they're really, trickling down to the state and local level. But what do people really feel? What impacts their day-to-day lives? What are the things that, when they're around their kitchen table or they're sitting up at night, what are the things that they really have concerns about? And David just, gave a great example of what this sector contributes, right? We through not only just the events themselves, but think about, when you go to a conference or you go to a trade show, right? It's the flight, it's the hotel, it's local transportation, it's restaurants, it's bars, all of that, right? This industry contributes a lot to cities nationwide, to towns nationwide. And like you said, that's supporting the tax base, that's police, that's firefighters, that's vital social services. Those are the nuts and bolts things that no matter whether you're in California or New York or everywhere in between, people care about, people notice that in their communities. And when you don't have those resources, well, that really matters. And people realize that they're not there. So that's why we're having folks tell their story and say, it's not only the shows themselves and the energy they bring, but the knock-on effects, small businesses, so many people in our ecosystem. I believe it's like 99% of the people in the show organizing space are small businesses by SBA definitions, right? If you think of it, every trade show is an episode of Shark Tank, where some new business is coming by to test their new wares and find that one seller who can get them nationwide exposure. That happens weekend after weekend, day after day. And that's why it's so important that members of Congress know the impact that our stakeholders have in their communities directly.
Well, and Roger, if I may, I'll give a quick example. I was in downtown Dallas. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area this past weekend, and I was in a restaurant. I was talking to one of the managers, down there, American Airlines Center, in the whole beautiful area in downtown Dallas, as you have in your city of Phoenix, and Tommy does in the DC area. He said, "What do you do?" I told him what I did. He goes, "Oh man, do we miss conventions and trade shows?" He said, "We're able to be open, but my business, 50% of my business annually in 2019 came from meetings, conventions, and trade shows that took over the downtown area. And you know what? A lot of people who live downtown, they don't like people running around with badges on. I love them. They kept me employed and they helped me put my kids through college."
Well, and we know that helps the entire citizenry of a local community based on all that additional new money that comes in. So Dave, as we get close to the end here, how are you going to deal with your annual fly-in or maybe lack of fly-in legislative day on Capitol Hill this year?
Well, Roger, thank you for your friendship and support over the years. You've helped us for the last 7 exhibitions day in Washington, D.C. But you know what? We've averaged, as you know, 125, 150 people in person, making about 100, 125 calls to staff offices. Sometimes we get the congressman or woman or the senator, but most times it's the good staff person that's taking notes and feeding information and building files on industries. But we had to go completely digital last year. We had 600 people involved, and we made about 450 contacts. It was good. It's not the same as looking in Tommy's eyes or Mary Smith's eyes, the staff person shaking his or her hand and spending 20 minutes in that office. It's not the same. So Tommy, what are we going to do this year?
So this year we're going to do exactly what David did last year in terms of creating an opportunity and creating a platform where people nationwide can be part of this event, right? And I think one of the things, you do lose a little something in the digital realm, but one of the things that I like about digital fly-ins and remote fly-ins is they're way more inclusive. People don't necessarily need to take time off of work and fly to Washington, D.C. They can participate as a part of their daily lives, and it just gives more constituents more opportunities to tell those stories we were just talking about. So we're going to do a kickoff event, and we'll probably have some sessions leading up to it, letting everybody in our community know about the issues we care about and what they can do to help. And then on June 2nd, we're going to virtually storm Capitol Hill and have an opportunity for folks on both the House and Senate side to hear from the entire business events community on that day about all the wonderful contributions that they make in their community. And, we had 600 last year, we're going to shoot for even higher this year. We want as many people in our world to come and tell their stories as possible, because Roger, like you said earlier, that's where the impact happens. That's where the change happens. And that's what we're going for.
Excellent. I like the point that you recognize that there are some differences and some challenges with that, but you're emphasizing the strengths and building more numbers and gaining more advocates. So how can people learn more about the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance?
Well, we would love for people to come and visit our website. It's ecalliance.us. But we'd also love for people to go and take a look. One of the campaigns that ECA is running, it's called Go Live Together. And it's brought the entire industry together. We've got more than 2,900 organizations in the business events ecosystem signed up as part of this coalition. And it's golivetogether.com. And if you go and visit that website, there's a button up in the upper right-hand corner that says Join Us. We'd love for you to click that button. We'll keep you up to date on some of what we're doing. We'll let you know how you can connect to your members of Congress to talk about why this industry is important to you. And we'll hopefully share some successes of states and cities nationwide reopening and getting folks in this business what they need to restart and get folks not only in this industry, but nationwide back to work.
And Roger, if I may, in addition, the ECA is the umbrella organization, the parent organization. We have two campaigns Tommy just described. One campaign that is so critical and will continue on the lobbying, relief, stimulus, legislative side. The other campaign is called, as you know, Roger, exhibitions mean business. It can be accessed through IAEE.com. That's IAEE.com. And that is going to be the longer term carrying forward public relations and communications program. So you've got ECA as the umbrella organization. Tommy and I and a gentleman by the name of David Adrain, who runs the Society of Independent Show Organizers, are the leading forces. And then we have an executive director of Go Live Together, Sue Sung, and executive director of Exhibitions Mean Business, Nicole Bowman. So all of us are, you've used this analogy many times, Roger, and thank you for letting me use your analogy that you got from somebody. We're all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction at the same time.
Absolutely. We will make sure that we add all this information into the show notes. And as we wrap up, on a personal note, I know Dave loves to knock around that little white golf ball. Tommy, what do you like to do when not at work or with your family?
Well, I am a big sports fan and a big music fan. So basically, all the other things that have been shut down during the pandemic that I'm looking to get back to. But my favorite thing these days, like David mentioned, I've got a wonderful 5-year-old son, and we got him hooked on a TV show called Lego Masters this year. So every day it's him and I doing our practice runs so that we can, whenever they run a father and son version of that, we're going to be ready to take the top prize.
You got it. That sounds great. Well, that's a wrap up of today's great conversation with Dave DuBois of IAEE and Tommy Goodwin of the ECA, the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance. Now it's time for the Advocacy Engagement Tip. Today's tip is from Tip. Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House, is famous for saying, all politics is local. So let me share an amazing statistic. There are over 537,000 elected officials in the United States, but only 537 of them are in Washington. The president, vice president, 100 senators, and 435 members of the House. So with the major bulk of elected officials at the local level, that's 529,000 of them at the local level. They're your mayors, your city council, local supervisors, just to name a few. They're your neighbors. They go to your church, they attend local events, they shop at the same stores that you do. So I firmly believe that all politics is local. Get to know these people, create relationships, tell your story as they affect your daily lives. Hey, and we are proud to have RAP Index as a sponsor of the show. Let's face it, today's advocacy arena is just plain noisy. Organizations are stretched. You need to take advantage to make sure that your issue gets the attention it deserves and your voice heard. The RAP Index is the best way to do just that by finding your stakeholders, relationships, and engagement power. Get past the noise, know who your people know. Go to rapindex.com. That's RAP index.com. Tell them Roger sent you. Hey, in upcoming episodes, you'll be treated to inspiring interviews from the leaders of the World of Politics Association and nonprofit causes, just like you heard from today. So if you like the podcast, head over to Apple, Google, Spotify, anywhere you can find your podcast. You can now even ask Alexa, hey, play that Voices in Advocacy podcast. A big thank you to Dave and Tommy for being on the show today. I greatly appreciate your time and passion for helping others through advocacy. Well, that's it for this episode of Voices in Advocacy. Remember, you have the power to be an effective and influential advocate. Now go out and make it a better world.
We hope you enjoyed today's Voices in Advocacy podcast and look forward to you joining us again next week. To learn more about Voices in Advocacy, go to our website, voicesinadvocacy.com.